Thank you for tuning into the Zelos Podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder, and this week I've got Ali Ghaisarnia in the house. That's right, he's a physical therapist, a CSCS, athletic trainer, all for the Green Bay Packers. But before we get underway, remember, just check out my website, rockysnyder.com. You can get podcast archives, you can get blogs. There's CEU workshops, online and in person, for all medical and training staff. And then do be sure to check out the 3-day functional summit for Perform Better this summer. LA or Long Beach, Chicago, and Providence, Rhode Island, performbetter.com. And also this summer is the NSCA 2025 National Conference. It'll be held July 16th to the 19th, Kansas City, Missouri. Be sure to register for that as well. And follow me on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Click that subscribe button and let's get this going. Well, Ali, I've been looking forward to our conversation. I can't lie. I love learning more about the inside story within the NFL and all the pros that are supporting the professional athletes there. So, first of all, welcome to Zealous, Ali.
Yeah, man, Rocky, I really appreciate the invitation. Been listening to the Zelos podcast and you for a couple of years now, and you've created such a great platform, and the content you put out is just an awesome research for awesome content for people like myself to consume, and as lifelong learners, just be able to consume that and always kind of be hearing different perspectives. And so this is an awesome platform you've created.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I mean, I view it as a selfish pursuit because I'm also a lifelong learner. And now I've trapped you in to this confine of 45 to 50 minutes or so. And I get to just pepper you with questions and learn from the best. So I really appreciate that. But before I start peppering you with a lot of those type of questions, I would love to learn about how you developed your career path. Like what inspired you from an earlier age to pursue physical therapy, to decide to also be an athletic trainer? Which one came first? And I know you did some time in Utah, did some time with the Steelers, and now you're with the Green Bay Packers. How did that all come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of looking, I guess, how I first got my origin story, I guess, my first kind of start in this, was always involved in sports ever since I was younger. Was a probably borderline below average athlete, so I didn't have the skill set to play in college. Played a multitude of different things: basketball, golf, soccer. But what kind of really most people get into this space overcoming an injury or being exposed to physical therapy, athletic training, overcoming an injury, which was not my story at all. Really, honestly, what prompted it was my senior year of high school, kind of trying to, prepare of like maybe what I wanted to do in college. And in one of my classes, one of the projects we had to do was research a career in a profession that we was kind of interesting to us, or maybe we just wanted to learn more about. And I was always really into science, but one thing I loved about watching sports is always like within basketball or football, the people who ran on the field and took care of injuries as people were down, and obviously they were attended to by doctors and athletic trainers. And I was always really captivated by that. So that project, I guess, kind of was the first captivating thing that really I was enthralled by the profession. And my brother was a physical therapist, so I guess I was kind of just with his profession, and then also my allure to wanting to be in kind of a performance and sports setting, that I guess I was kind of I was led into the family business. So I started in college in the before it changed into a master's degree. It was still a bachelor's at the time, so I got my bachelor's in athletic training at the
Mm.
University of Kansas. And then had a hand in a lot of variety of sports, and kind of providing sideline coverage per the education requirements. But one thing that I immediately fell in love with was just point A to point Z, and how to rehab and recover from an injury, and kind of overcoming that. So the rehab aspect was always one thing that was very intriguing to me. And honestly, self-reflecting, that was the one area I wanted to grow and get better at too. So at the end of my athletic training kind of education, I pursued a physical therapy degree at Boston University. And
Oh, right
yeah,
on.
yeah, go Terriers. So
Yeah.
Between those two stops, I was able to do some internships within professional football. Was very lucky. A lot of great mentors along the way that kind of connected me. And honestly, I'm just a product of great mentors and teachers. But at the end of PT school, kind of thought like, hey, maybe this football thing would be something I would love to do. And still kind of looking at what areas I needed to grow at. I still felt like just the high performance based level of someone who maybe a collegiate based athlete, professional athlete, if they come through those doors, how can I really provide that end stage rehab a little bit better, which basically mimics sports performance and what obviously from a day-to-day standpoint, what strength and conditioning coaches do daily. So for me, that led me to pursue a sports residency experience, and I ended up in Pittsburgh for that. That's when I got my experience basically working with the Steelers for a year, but still doing clinic work on the side. And
Did
then
somebody
kind of
set you
fast.
up with that? Did you pursue the opening with the Steelers yourself, or did you have like one of your mentors go, "Hey, I've gotten in with these guys. Let me put your name in the mix," or how did it work?
Yeah, so with the after physical therapy school, the sports residency programs that basically offer more skilled experience and exposure for those who are still trying to kind of grow their skill set and kind of grow and develop. This relationship between my program UPMC and the Steelers was set up long, many moons ago before I got there.
Gotcha.
It's been
Okay,
yeah,
cool,
it's one of the richest kind of sports residencies that's out there, and
nice.
has a very the hospital and the obviously it provides the medical care for it's the official healthcare sponsor for the Steelers. So it's such a close relationship that that relationship fostered this kind of having the residents myself who applied and worked at the clinic go over and I basically split my time 50-50 at the sports physical therapy clinic, and then in the mornings and some afternoons I'd be at the Steelers helping with some of their rehabs, long-term care, and obviously any way I could get my hands dirty and just provide and contribute in any way I could there from a day-to-day basis. And
Nice.
um, yeah, so that was kind of how that was set up. And then, getting to the end of that experience was kind of looking to my next chapter, and was still my end goal was still like, hey, this football setting, it provides so many challenges, but it keeps you on your toes, and it really forces you and challenges you to kind of be on it really forces you to be on your brings your A game every single day. It's
Mm,
not predictable at all. It's very variable and unpredictable. So I really I really enjoyed that there was no
nice.
monotony, and there was no it wasn't tedious at all to me. So that was a setting I really wanted to be in. And so fast forward, sometimes with job openings, timing is everything. But my current boss, Nate Weir, gave me a call around March and was telling me that the Packers were looking to expand their staff, and the rest is history. So that kind of leads me into my role now with the Packers of being a physical therapist and athletic trainer.
Dude, that is great. Okay, I'm gonna back up for a second, and I want to ask you, how did you take inventory of your strengths and weaknesses? Was that through some type of organized approach? Was that with the help of a counselor, mentor, friend, family member? Or was that just you sitting down and going, okay, whether you wrote it out on paper or just did it mentally, where am I weak? Where are my strengths? What do I want to improve upon? How did that come about?
Yeah, that self-audit process was a little bit of the former and the latter. So both what you kind of described. It was having feedback from mentors that I think really invested their time and energy in wanting the best for me. And they gave me, things to work on at each step of the way. And it was also fueled by, I guess, my relentless pursuit of trying to, look for ways I can improve myself. And a lot of that, it was just honestly a lot of the experiences and steps along the way, envisioning seeing a lot of great people and seeing the great work they did, and I was like, man, I don't think I would have been able to do what you just did, or how did you come to that idea? I would have never gotten there. And along the way too of just watching, whether it be conferences, webinars, a lot of resources out there that I just felt frankly like that I was never on that same level of wavelength, and I was, in that self audit process of thinking to myself, like, if I truly want to be where, if I want to accomplish my goals, like this is something I really need to get better at. And also, quite frankly, I was, if let's say when I was in physical therapy school, if a person post-op ACL came into my clinic that day and writing up a 9-month program to get them back to whatever sport they were playing, I flat out, like, I was very honest with myself. I was like, man, I don't think I could do that right now. So I think being brutally honest with myself and also relying on others not to sugarcoat things for me really promoted that. And I think it realized what, what boxes I definitely needed to check, and what areas I definitely needed to water and foster that growth in before I accomplish my goals. Because along the way, it's obviously it's about your who you are as a person, but you still got to know the technical skills and still have the ability to complete the job to your best abilities. So that was really what I wanted to be very competent in, before kind of getting to this level.
Right on. Okay, so you've got two major skill sets. One as a physical therapist and another one as an athletic trainer. Which is the primary role that you serve with the Packers? Like, what is your official title right now?
Yeah, so my official title is physical therapist and assistant athletic trainer. And so with the fortunate thing is within our staff, it's so big, but that means just a lot of different perspectives. And our staff is one that a lot of people, the people we have on staff have numerous years of experience. So it's nice for me to kind of rely on those opinions. And when you've been in the trenches for so long, obviously you've seen certain things and certain patterns that just someone myself that doesn't have those years of experience wouldn't necessarily have been able to grasp. But so that's definitely been a fortunate thing in my role. But I would say, to answer your question, it's truly 50-50. During the week, myself and there's one other physical therapist on staff. So, but I think we all view ourselves as just within the medical staff of clinicians, and we each have different skill sets. And I think we're really good about just kind of viewing ourselves of within this big puzzle, where can we fit in as a piece and contribute and ultimately provide the best care as a global staff, so we can put the best product out there, hopefully help our team win, but also obviously taking care of the athletes the best way we can as well. So yeah, I would say my role is very split 50-50 between practices, role in the training room, and then also game day coverage as well.
Wow. Okay. So as you take a kind of a professional personal inventory, what what's your what is your total superpower when it comes to athletic training and physical therapy? You spoke of patterns and seeing emerging patterns, especially for those that are more seasoned that have seen a lot more. But of the time that you've been there and your previous experience, is that and I don't want to compartmentalize the body, but I like surgeons do. Oh, this guy's a hip guy. This guy's a shoulder guy. This guy's a knee expert. This one deals with the ankle and foot and so on. I'm hoping that's not necessarily the case, but maybe like some common injuries, whether it's ACLs, high hamstring pulls, low back. Like, what's your strength when it comes to, say, physical therapy, and then what's your strength when it comes to athletic training? If you could pick it apart.
Yeah, yeah, good question. I think from my experiences, the good thing is, and obviously coming from residency, is you have to, from that residency training, you kind of have to satisfy and be pretty competent in everything. Certainly, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, there's certain things that I'm more interested in, and I think that's one of the things going through Pittsburgh's program is they're one of the foremost leaders and on the frontier of ACL and kind of post-op knee research. But there's all the other kind of niche areas there that they. One of my mentors was one of the foremost leaders in kind of non-arthritic hip conditions. Think of your FAI, kind of your labral conditions, and then that there's other numerous, because it's such a big hospital systems. There's so many experts in each, almost like you were saying, kind of anatomical body parts. And I think that's the one thing I really kind of gleaned on and took from that training is being able to rely on all these experts on this area. But not to lie to you, there's definitely things that I'm more interested or that, just when you see that you have on your caseload, you're
Such
like,
as, come on,
yeah,
spit it out. What is it? What do you like to? What gets your mojo flowing?
For me, definitely any knee injuries or hip injuries, like those are the things that that you kind of have a fire in your stomach and you get fired up when you get those on your caseload. So for me, that's always been a major interest for me. But also now I think so one thing that I didn't think a couple of years ago that I would be super interested in was just shoulders, but now, that's a main interest of mine as well, just from being in the position that you're in the NFL. You get so many not only soft tissue injuries from the lower body and knee injuries, but you get so many contact and upper extremity injuries as well. So just based on the kind of the role and position I have, and essentially just being around it so often, that's kind of been one thing that's I'm a little more interested in compared to younger Ali when 4 or 5 years ago too. So yeah, I would say those three things are definitely what's kind of in my main like in interest in intrigue.
Okay, and when it comes to that interest and intrigue, is there a difference between how you feel about, say, those type of injuries that occur because of non-contact versus contact or blunt force trauma? Like, is there more mystery to you for the non-contact injuries and go, okay, why was that the breaking point compared to, oh, well, that guy just got pummeled right into the turf. It's no wonder. Of course, that's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly the especially in football, like just the violent and nature of the game, you're always going to have things you can never prevent. A guy falls into the outside of your leg, like you could do all the preventative types of strength and performance training you want, but you're never going to be able to prevent that MCL or ACL sprain. So, yeah, to your question, I think it's the for us, like what keeps us up at night is like what ways can we you're never going to be able to prevent everything, but what ways can we mitigate these non-contact things the best we can? And I think a lot of it is I- in when it comes to injury risk mitigation, what ways can we even when it comes to the significance and severity of an injury, is there a way by from sports performance and you know the things we do in the weight room and on field and from a preparation standpoint, are there ways that we could potentially a guy gets a grade 2 versus a grade 3 hamstring strain, if that makes sense? So I think that
Total
keeps us up.
sense.
Yeah, yeah, that keeps us up as well of what ways can we just build more resilient athletes so that their bodies are able to withstand the forces that they undergo from a daily basis, but then also when something does happen, which inevitably will, is there a way that we could have prepared them that maybe the significance and severity isn't as bad as what would have normally happened if they didn't undergo, all this training and physical preparation?
That's the stuff I love. That is just like, okay, let's lock ourselves in a room for a day and a half or a weekend and just suss that all out because I love that stuff. So obviously, you've got some ideas. I'm sure a lot has to do with looking at an individual athlete's health history and pre-existing conditions or um, injuries, trauma, physical and emotional, dating back to the beginning of their life. Basically, I don't know. That's what I'm guessing because mainly the earlier the trauma, the more likely movement patterns have been established and cemented. And then had to be negotiated with to the next trauma, and you can roll it all the way back, kind of looking at tree rings, or I don't know, peeling back the onion, and so on. Like how far back for you professionally and personally, how far back are you in do you investigate your individual athletes to find out what happened before that happened?
Yeah, so I mean, you just hit the nail on the head that from past injury history, that's the number one predictor if anyone's gonna if someone is gonna sustain a future injury, we know the biggest risk is always gonna be their prior injury history. I think it's a little arbitrary, but to your question of, we try and rely on research, literature, data, and statistics that exist within. Okay, now if someone's 5 years after, let's say, a shoulder labral injury, are they kind of out of the woods, or are they still at risk for a similar injury in that regard? So some of it is dependent on body part and condition. For example, we know that when you've had an ACL, some of these deficits can last up to 3 years after that initial injury. So it's something you definitely want to monitor and manage that person as they return after, especially after when they're back for their first season. But it's not just that first season; it's that second and third season as well. When you look at soft tissue injuries, you look at not only, as you alluded to, when did that first occur along their kind of general maturation, and when they started to play organized and competitive sports? What was the frequency of it? What was the of the soft tissue injuries? What were the severities of that? Were they all these other extraneous variables? What position did they play? What was their weight at? Were they training at that point? What was their training age? So there's a lot of modifiable and non-modifiable factors that go into this as well. For example, if someone in college that didn't, let's say they weren't necessarily doing a formalized strength and conditioning program, and they sustain a soft tissue injury, well, 2 years after that, let's say they do, they're going through their proper maintenance and strength and conditioning program, and which is just good performance training, right? Which obviously helps mitigate a lot of that risk too. But I mean, even something as simple as that can really allude to and kind of explain maybe why things occurred. And so all these things are always questions we're always asking ourselves. And the hard thing is, like you first kind of led off with your question, is like, with all these guys, we have their entire injury history dating back to, even even to their middle school years. Which of it is actually insightful and actually practical, and which of it is a little bit more, coincidence? And you get this all the time. Like, some of this can just be coincidence.
Yeah, no, I get it. That's the stuff that I love. It's just like, oh man, we have so many potential origins for these compensatory patterns, right? But even beside that, it offers up another question entirely, one that might keep you up at night, and that is, how comprehensive is the rehabilitative process itself? If, in fact, you have a person that has an ACL who has recovered from surgery, and 3 seasons later, there is still the risk of a recurring event or something that may be somehow related to that, whether it is a groin pull because they have not completely rehabilitated that. So I gotta, I don't know, I just gotta kind of talk about the elephant in the room, and like the rehabilitative process is something that is still, I believe, in a toddler infancy kind of stage, even though physical therapy is amazing. And but it was born out of war veterans that were blown up from like acute issues, and for many times we've tried to place that acute protocol onto chronic or non-contact injuries. So now, fortunately for guys like you coming out of BU with physical therapy, now you've seen that, but you've seen the acute care, but now you're starting to recognize that, oh, there's integrative patterns, there's biomechanics involved, because it's not just the knee we have to be concerned with. We've got to be concerned with the other leg and the ipsilateral shoulder. And for that matter, what is the spine doing throughout this entire rehab process? So now, I guess my question is, how how fully do you feel that we are, as an industry, truly rehabilitating the athletes?
Yeah, that's $1 million question, and there's definitely days where, I leave my job and I'm like, man, did what I do today even matter? Like,
Right?
so you definitely have those days of, I think, holistically, as a profession and as a from a rehabilitation science entity, I think each year, as as a whole, athletic training, physical therapy, I think we're learning more and more each year, and ultimately that hopefully helps us drive to enhance our decision making and our care for our athletes. When it comes down to our current ability and taking care of the athlete in front of us, there's definitely times that you're a lot of times in sport, there's never going to be black and white scenarios. There's a
No.
lot of gray, and I think that's the thing it kind of keeps you in that space, because you have to always be on your toes, and is if you're always inquisitive and kind of always asking questions, it's always kind of a fun challenge to know for each scenario, each person in front of you, it's always going to be different. And there's no you can pick up on patterns, but every individual that you're working with is always going to have different nuances and different variables that's always going to make them different from the person next to them and the person that you saw before them. So I think
Well,
in
that's
general,
good.
we're yeah, sorry, good. Yeah, yeah.
No, well, I think that's what separates you from the I will just say the seasoned veterans who no longer really want to explore knowledge and education. Like you are hungry for learning more, and therefore you're not going to be satisfied with what you're offering, and you're constantly trying to better yourself. So, I mean, total respect for you. And I hope my question wasn't like trying to throw the entire industry under the bus. In fact, it was really to inspire, like, we have so much more to learn about this, and passing the spectrum of rehab to return to performance. Earlier it felt like instead of a relay race where you're passing the baton, you'd actually have to throw it to the next department and hope they catch it, and they'll run with it and they'll throw the baton, and there wasn't actually a handoff. Now you're kind of handing it off, but we don't have a firm grip where it's fully transferring over. There's like these gaps that are missing within this, even though it's so comprehensive. I myself am kind of like deep into the rehab and return to performance field, and I'm seeing like, oh wow, we have no idea really how to transfer, how to progress at this area. Nor do we actually consider regressing at this point either. So I guess what I'm saying is it's still so young and exciting that we have so much more room for improvement. And you're kind of just leading the front on that with your position and what you're doing, and your hunger for for self-improvement and the improvement of your players. So just want to kind of make that clear.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that, and like everything you described, it's kind of the whole Dunning Kruger effect, right? Like when you first come out of school, you know all these skills, you learn everything, and then you go to apply it, and at first you don't know what you're doing, and then you gain a little experience, and then you become almost overconfident, and you're almost over boasting your ability. And then it's like almost, you gain a little bit more experience, and then your knowledge, your expertise, it comes down, and the more you learn, you actually find out that, hey, like I actually don't know as much as I thought I knew. And you kind of see it's humbling, as well as you see how much further you have to grow and develop. And yeah, to your point earlier, like I don't think I did not get any sentiment of that asking that was a shot at any regard. I think, the fun thing about this is, realizing of how many important people as stakeholders in our support staff, like your example with the baton pass off, it's like, you can only do the best you can with the information in front of you. And I think, as you mentioned, each year we're learning more and more. There's more research, and it just starts by asking questions. And I think, in this field, the second you stop asking those questions or stop wanting to learn and kind of find out why, it's the second you become complacent. And in our setting, like you can't ever be complacent. You can't ever rest on your laurels. You got to keep growing. And there's that age old saying, you're either getting better or worse every day, 1% better or worse. So hopefully trending in the positive direction. But
Right on. So you also alluded to in this conversation, like working with athletes and trying to assess the individual. I'm curious what kind of tools are in your toolbox when it comes to assessing just movement, joint mechanics. Like, do you have a screening process that you prefer over others? Is it something that's very common, something you developed yourself, or that the organization really likes? How do you do that?
Yeah, so when it comes to kind of screening and examination, I think multiple people on your podcast have probably alluded to this. I think your eyes and your hands give you the best information that you'll obtain. Certainly, there's other objective and objective parameters and technology that's come out to get more objective numbers like GPS, force plates, some of the handheld dynamometry, Nordboard, what have you. Like, there's so many bells and whistles now that it gives you and again, you're just collecting information and data points to hopefully enhance your decision making. And so some of that goes down to, some of those isolated base tests. Some of it comes down to just a good old fashioned, clinical exam with your hands, going from the table, looking at, individual joints and their individual capacities and competencies. And then, obviously looking at how they're moving standing, because there's no sport that occurs on laying down on your back, and so we as humans are always we play our sports on our 2 feet and interact with the environment around us standing. So, looking at a couple different movements standing as well, and then what gives you, I think, the best information as well. I alluded to the eye test, but when that individual is in their natural environment playing the sport they do, or let's say they're a receiver and they're running their route tree at practice. I think, just observing that in their natural environment, how they're going to practice and then compete, I think that itself gives you the best information. And then also consulting with, that I think the beauty of things of when you get to, the high performance model and being around other departments, the coaches are going to be able to pick up on things that they've been in that sport their entire life, and there's a reason they're coaching certain movements, and there's a reason they are there as well. So relying on their skill set and their expertise and their watchful eye, if you're noticing perhaps getting in and out of their cuts are a little bit slower, that they're not utilizing one side versus the other, asking the coach like, hey, is it supposed to look like that? I'm noticing this. And then they might kind of confirm what you're thinking, or they might say, oh no, they're supposed to, do this is normal as part of their in breaking cut or something like that. So I think all of those tools and kind of screening abilities, that all kind of puts the picture of the clinical picture of kind of who you're working with, how they're moving, and then all these individual capacities that, it's individual parts that make up the entire human movement system.
Right on. So, in certain organizations, it is encouraged for team members in a not necessarily a sports team, but let's just take I don't know, some organization where you start from the ground up, basically pushing the broom, emptying the garbage and so on, and then you make your way to the floor as a salesperson. And then you become assistant manager, manager, and so on. You work your way through the entire spectrum, accumulating skill sets so that you can, in a pinch, be able to understand what needs to be done and have the skill to actually perform it, even if that means going back and emptying the garbage cans, right? So I bring this up as an analogy because, brother, you have got so much under your belt, not only being a physical therapist and athletic trainer as part of the medical team, but you're also CSCS. So you're part of the training team. So you have broadened your knowledge base. And I'm curious about, how does that lay over to your actual practical experience? Like, are you in the weight room utilizing the information you glean from CSCS, but being on the field as an athletic trainer and then taking the guys into the treatment room and working with them at the PT? Like, are you spanning the globe?
I would say in some capacities. I mean, to your question, and I think you kind of alluded to this earlier, but a part of a high performance team, there's going to be people. You have your own skill set that you're bringing to the table, but you're also going to have disciplines around you that are bringing other skill sets and other domains and niche based skills that you want to be aware of those. But and my whole kind of obviously, I kind of told you earlier that one of the things I struggled with early on was this spectrum and continuum of initial injury and then getting back to kind of return to performance and what that
Yeah.
looked like. And so that really motivated me to, kind of get into the books and learn more about performance training and get the CSCS. which has helped my, that it's definitely helped my, rehab planning and being able to periodize and get someone back to that level. But it's also helped me when you diversify and kind of understand, read things outside of your own domain too. It helps you speak some of that same language as well with other departments. And I think that just enhances your own that communication intercollaboratively. And so, to your question, during certain phases of the year or certain time points of the year, there are times where, we're in the weight room and we're not necessarily strength coaches, but we're helping them run their program. And if there's something we see, we have the ability to help correct it, or help out in ways, and just contribute and give another watchful eye. It's not that we're trying to step outside our lane by any means. I mean, we're always going to defer to our performance staff and our strength and conditioning coaches on that. But another capacity is, for our post-op procedures and surgical guys, when they're kind of in that middle phase, that's when we're kind of starting to, my whole goal is that if I'm trying to prepare them to be able to complete the training program that our head strength and conditioning coach and our performance coach writes for them. And so, between discussing along the experiences I've had, it's like, well, I've got this guy post-op, but he's having still faults, and he can't squat correctly. Well, hopefully, like, my whole goal is to prepare them that when they get to the weight room and they're working with strength and conditioning, hopefully they can just, the only thing hopefully I can prepare them for is just getting them as strong, as fast, as powerful as they can get. Because hopefully if I've done my job, they don't have to correct these faulty mechanics, and they shouldn't have to worry about pain or anything like that. Like, hopefully at that point they can just, they can complete their job to their best ability, which is obviously working on their best performance. So I think it's helped me tremendously of just kind of being able to speak the language and read the language of other departments. But not only that, it's helped my own process and my own framework and principles when it comes to rehabilitation and what that looks like across the continuum.
So, with like, let's just talk about fundamental lifts in the weight room, not the accessories, but just the foundational lifts of squat, deadlift, in the case of football, typically bench press, right? All the core lifts. And you've got an athlete that's returning from rehab, and now they're into the return to play. Prior to return to performance, they're getting a little bit back on the field. Like, when it comes time to get them in the weight room, have you already, like, as part of your process in the spectrum, have you already started to kind of watch these fundamental lift movements, like you were just saying about the squat? Are you going to watch the mechanics there before they actually begin loading? Or is it just kind of like, is that one of those things that you just kind of skip over? Okay, they're in the weight room. We're going to let the strength coaches deal with that. And if they'll just talk to us if they notice any movement faults.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to kind of that first initial, let's say getting back into the deadlift for the example you use. I mean, hopefully during the kind of the time they're with us, hopefully we're kind of reteaching them and using the time to almost, you know get their hinge mechanics, and that almost, not to say they're getting under a bar or a trap bar deadlift and doing that twice their body weight just yet, but hopefully we're
Right.
teaching the proper mechanics of that in a very modified and safe way, and then loading that over time. So then, as you said, once they get to the weight room, hopefully at a certain point, we've either with some of those lifts, we've either used derivatives or modifications of those lifts, so they've seen it in one way or another. Or we've worked on kind of some of those archetypes. So it doesn't matter if they're doing a bench
Hmm.
press, if they've done like a floor press or some sort of pressing movement with their either, call it whatever mode of loading you want to use, single arm or double arm. Hopefully we've kind of addressed that, and then even as they still kind of go through this, this return to fitness where they get under the bar for the first time, and even if they're not loading it at all, then that way, our performance staff can really, they're the best ones when it comes to kind of teaching those fundamental movements as well. So hopefully I've kind of prepared them that they can do those types of movements proficiently without load, or in some ways with modified, whether it be ranges of motions or, like I said, the derivatives of that with load. And then as they go back into kind of more of your traditional core lifts, they can do that without any issues or without any compensations. And then our performance staff can then therefore load them up to kind of accomplish whatever goals or physical qualities they're trying to adapt.
All right. Well, take me through that's great. Take me through your thought process of like troubleshooting when that does not occur. Meaning, like, you mentioned the hip hinge. You also were talking about ACL, so single leg, proper loading of the single leg. Like, when you're getting those players to encourage a proper hip hinge, or we're loading onto that affected leg, and you see some discrepancy, something that should be happening but it's not. So we'll just say something's missing. How do you suss it out? What's your problem solving process? Like, it may just come to you naturally and you're just like, oh, I can't really tell you. I just know. And I'll get that. I understand that. But at the same time, if you could actually really verbalize the thought process you take, I would love to know that.
Yeah, I think to try and verbalize it, I think it's multiple components. I think
Yeah.
to your point, sometimes it is just kind of an innate troubleshoot, problem solving, like, you just see something and you're like, "Hey, maybe this will work." I always think that whenever you're trying to, for those core foundational movements, or I think it comes down to, like, as humans, we're always gonna push, pull, crawl, carry, those basic human movements. And so when you're almost trying to do those movements and teaching that basic movement pattern for the first time, for me, it kinda comes down to starting with the simplest entry point. So, if people are having trouble with a hinge standing, well, we can always take them to a quadruped or a tall kneeling position and have them do that on their knees before before they have their full support of gravity and standing. And when you have to go use more, obviously longer levers and more of a posterior weight shift. So I think, that for me, it always comes down to positions, what movement you're trying to train, and then ultimately, like, if this is what I know the program is that they're gonna have to do from a training perspective, or I know, our performance and strength and conditioning coaches love to program, a certain lift, overhead presses. Well, I know I have to at least prepare them for that and scale it back. So even if they're still just doing, laying on their back and using a dowel, and they're just pushing that up and using that as their first entry point. What ways can I make it accomplishable and build confidence for them? And if they're struggling with it, then it's our job to try and scale it back, regress it, and so they're kind of getting the movement and mechanics behind that. Um, Another example I like to use is kind of setting up the example of kind of the theory of constraints based training, and what ways can we set up the environment, because a lot of times the tasks we're doing we can modify the environment. Sometimes you can't always modify the person. So within those three key variables, what ways can we kind of set up the environment? So, like, I always think sometimes when you say less, it's almost better. So just kind of set up the environment so they accomplish the task or skill in the exact way that you want without you having to say much. And so I think, hopefully that answers your question of a long-winded way
Yeah.
of like what my process of that.
No, it's great. Yeah, regression is the key. That's what I got out of that. And then you're going to either change the environment, you're going to change the body position, you're going to simplify the movement, you're going to go from multi joint down to more single joint. If that is the issue, you're going to try and activate something that is not, and then reintegrate it, progress it back again, and see if that did it. And if it didn't, then you repeat the process and look for something else. That's what I got out of it. And it's great. I would love, maybe there's a book out there and I just haven't been stumbled over to it, but I love logical processes. I love the logical thought patterns, especially for those that are adept at their skill. For those are the ones that say, well, I just did it. I just saw what they were doing and it just came to me. It's like, okay, Well, that's great, but you are maybe just challenged by the way you could verbalize your thought process. And I don't know why, but it's like following clues. There's a yes and a no, and it's a drop down list. If yes, then we go here. If no, we go here. And before you know it, there's this logical process. And I think we can apply that to what we do working with general population or athletes, especially recovering from injuries and so on. For me, it just organizes the thoughts a little bit more. And you did exactly that when you were describing it. So it's great. Okay, so we talked about your strengths. What about your kryptonite? What do you want to improve upon? What are you focused on now?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is as we, each year as we use more technology and as AI is becoming a bigger thing in our world, and as we're always using for the best piece of equipment and ways to always just find the cutting edge. Really, one thing like my kryptonite, I guess you would say, is or the thing I'm working on right now is how to better visualize and organize data, and kind of present it in such a way that it's easier to digest, and hopefully by doing that, I think you can spin your wheels a lot with like take force plates and the amount of metrics and things you can measure and monitor with those. And it's certainly, the first time you use those, you can definitely get overwhelmed. It can almost be daunting to even get a start in that too. Excuse me. So for me, I think it's just within our we're always using, I think, in our world we're always trying to look for data and using that to find the next best answer, or try and justify, or if there's another decision we need to make, allow us to pivot and move in another direction. So for me, it's kind of all about organizing, cleaning data, what ways to collect it better, what ways to fine tune it better, so it's good data, not bad data, and then the whole visualization and analysis part of that too.
Yeah, because there's that phrase paralysis through analysis, which so much data I could see we fall prey to that, and hopefully that doesn't happen very much. But there's so much information, so many data points that I'm sure there's more data points that are left off to the side than you actually utilize because things are measured to almost an infinitesimal degree. It's amazing. So harvesting and knowing what to harvest, boy, that's a daunting task. So good luck with that. I'm sure you got some great sports scientists on staff that are guiding you through that. But I can't believe here we are. We're pretty much at the 50-minute mark right now. You've enthralled me, Ali. You really have. I've been really enjoying this conversation, and so tell me this: if people, of course, we connect through LinkedIn. It's a great source for networking with colleagues and professionals in the field. So I'll make sure that's in the description of the podcast too. But do you do much on social media like Instagram or other channels?
Yeah, yeah. So I would say LinkedIn's probably, that and Instagram are probably the channels I'm probably active most on. I'm not as prolific and as active when it comes to putting out content as you, Rocky. So the resources like you kind of help help people like us, with consumption of that. But yeah, and then if people Google my name, I mean, there's probably not too many people that have similar last names. So but yeah, always happy to connect and contact, and discussions like this is where I feel like just one-on-one conversations, or kind of this whole the antithesis of your podcast, of just asking questions, getting different perspectives. I think that that just leads to reframing a lot of our decision making, and allows us to hopefully approach our process with new fresh ideas.
And now here we are. We're basically at the end of February, and you've got you. This is obviously the off season. Things don't start ramping up until, well, in terms of the players showing up, July and it's August. So, but I know you're continuing to work through these months. But what is it like? I guess it's my pretty much my last question though. What is it like this time of year for you? as part of the Packers organization, is this like, oh man, you have no idea. You thought season was busy. Now I am just, they've got me jumping through so many hoops I can't get over it. Not to get yourself in trouble, but what is this? Is this like, oh yeah, I've got time to kick back with you. You want to go another hour? I've got nothing going on, or I've got to get back to work right now.
No, our feet aren't to the fire right now. I would say there's always stuff to do year round. It kind of seems like that it never really ends, but this time of the year you definitely can breathe a little bit better. You definitely have more time. The days don't the days are you have more time in the day. I'll say that. At this point in the year, we're kind of getting ready for combines this week, and then so you're kind of getting ready for your draft process of what that looks like, and kind of helping helping front office and those folks with kind of a medical perspective on things. But and then after the draft, right after the draft, you kind of roll right into off season program and OTAs, and then like you said, you get another little short break, chance to breathe, kind of rejuvenate, and then you're full steam ahead into training camp. So yeah, this time of the year is definitely nice. Obviously you're not burning the candle from both ends. It's you definitely have more time for yourself, family, friends, getting recharged, and then kind of as you get late summer, you kind of know what's in front of you. But it definitely helps when you have this time of the year to recharge for that.
All right, and then the last one, I guess. You spent time at BU in the heart of Boston. You've spent time Three River Stadium. You got the Steelers, and now you're in the frozen tundra. Do you know how to ice skate?
Not well. I've done it once, and I'm sure the longer I live in Wisconsin, hopefully that's a
Yeah.
skill I'll develop. Yeah, I've done it once, and I can say I'm not. I gave it a shot, but I'm no Sidney Crosby out there. So
They
hopefully
will
I can
kick
keep.
you out. They will kick you out of the
Yeah,
state if you don't learn. So,
yeah. I will
uh,
definitely get some sour looks if I don't look like I know what I'm doing out there. So.
well, as long as you keep cranking out what you're doing right now, they're going to have no reason to throw you out for sure. Ali, man, this has been so great. I can't thank you enough for coming on. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and if the opportunity arises somewhere down the road and we can get you back on, I would love to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been awesome, Rocky. Like I said, I'm grateful for the invitation and from what you've created and kind of the platform that you've had, the guests that you've had on. It's almost doesn't feel real that I'm on that list, but man, I appreciate it. Likewise, thoroughly enjoyed our discussion and would love to run it back sometime soon.
And there we go, another one in the books. Man, that was fast. Ali, thank you so much, and thank you to the Green Bay Packers organization for allowing this to happen. Remember, you can go to my website, rockysnyder.com, for continuing education, podcast, blogs. Heck, there's even a shop there you can buy some stuff, including my book, Return to Center. Don't forget the Perform Better 3-day functional summits coming this summer, as well as the NSCA 2025 National Conference. That's going to be in Kansas City, Missouri, July 16th to the 19th. Hope to see you there. See you next week.